No gentleman would ever choose you, Aunt Beatrice sneered as she placed a marriage contract before Clara. Sign it now, or leave this house before the snow begins. Clara looked past the contract toward her father's empty chair. By signing, she would surrender Whitmore Mill, the 12 cottages surrounding it, and every account book that could prove Mr. Vale had been collecting rent from families who owed nothing. By refusing, she would have nowhere to sleep. She lifted the pen, but did not touch the paper. Aunt Beatrice's mouth tightened. Do not pretend you have another choice. Your father filled your head with numbers and ledgers when he should have taught you obedience. Mr. Vale is willing to overlook your habits. My habits discovered that 6 families were charged twice for the same quarter. Your suspicions will not feed you. Neither will a stolen mill. Mr. Vale stepped away from the fireplace. He was broad-shouldered and carefully dressed, with a smile that never reached his pale eyes. Once we are married, Clara, you will no longer need to trouble yourself with business. That is precisely why I will not marry you. Aunt Beatrice struck the table with her palm. The inkpot jumped. Sign. Clara's fingers tightened around the pen. Her father had taught her that fear was most dangerous when it hurried a person. Read every line, he used to say, especially the lines someone does not want you to read. Her gaze returned to the contract. At the bottom, beneath the red wax seal, a thin black edge showed through. 2 seals had been pressed together. Before Clara could examine it, Mr. Vale covered the document with his hand. You have until the clock strikes 8. Hoofbeats exploded across the frozen courtyard. Everyone in the room turned. A horse stumbled to a stop beyond the tall windows. Its rider dismounted before the groom could reach him and crossed the snow with the unsteady determination of a man who had not rested in many hours. The front doors opened. A tall stranger entered, wearing a torn black riding coat. Frost clung to his dark hair, and dried blood marked one glove where the leather had split across his knuckles. The servants froze. Aunt Beatrice's face lost its colour. "The Duke of Blackmere," she whispered. The Duke handed his coat to no one. His grey eyes moved across the room, taking in the contract, the packed trunk beside the staircase, and the pen still held between Clara's fingers. "I came to court, Miss Whitmore," he announced. For one breath, no one spoke. Then Aunt Beatrice laughed too quickly. "Your Grace, you cannot possibly know my niece." "No," the Duke replied, "but I know someone in this house has been stealing from both of our estates." He placed a worn account book on the table. Clara recognized the cracked brown cover immediately. "My father's rent ledger." She reached for it, but Mr. Vale seized it first. "This was stolen from my office. It was found beneath the false floor of a carriage abandoned on Blackmere land," the Duke said. "A carriage, registered in your name." Vale's grip hardened around the book. "Then someone must have planted it. An explanation you may offer after you return it to Miss Whitmore." The Duke's voice remained quiet, but Vale released the ledger. Clara opened it. Several pages had been removed, yet the remaining columns confirmed what she had suspected. Payments from Whitmore tenants had been redirected into an account marked with a black stag, the emblem of Blackmere. "You believed my family received this money," the Duke said. "The records said Blackmere was purchasing my father's debts, and my records say Whitmore Mill failed to pay for grain delivered last autumn. Neither statement is true." Clara looked at him. "How did you know the calculations were mine?" "You number your columns from right to left when checking a balance. My steward called it an error. I called it the only reason I discovered £900 missing." 1. A flicker of pride rose inside her, followed quickly by caution. "And that was enough to make a duke ride all night to court a woman he has never met?" "No." His answer was immediate. The Duke reached inside his coat and removed a single folded page. This was... Clara recognized her handwriting. The page contained calculations showing how the false rents linked Whitmore Mill to the Blackmere accounts. But beneath the numbers, someone had added a sentence. "If I disappear before Christmas, ask who forced me to sign." Clara's breath caught. "I did not write that." "I suspected as much," the Duke said. "The ink is 3 years older than the calculations." Aunt Beatrice moved toward the bell pull. "You arrive in my home making monstrous accusations. My niece is confused, and this conversation is finished." "No," Clara said. Her aunt stopped. Clara set down the forged page and pulled the marriage contract toward her. With the edge of her father's silver account key, she pressed gently beneath the red wax. The upper seal cracked. A second impression appeared underneath, a black stag pierced by a narrow line. The Duke's expression changed. "That is not my crest," he said. "It is the private mark used by the man who manages my northern properties." Mr. Vale backed toward the door. Clara looked from the hidden seal to the missing pages in her father's ledger. The contract had never been intended merely to give Vale control of her mill. It was designed to make her legally responsible for accounts connected to Blackmere. Someone wanted her signature before the theft was discovered. Aunt Beatrice snatched the contract from the table and thrust it into the fire. The Duke moved first, but Clara was closer. She caught one corner before the flames consumed it. Heat burned her fingers as she pulled the document free and crushed the smoking edge against the carpet. Most of the writing survived, but the hidden seal had melted into a black stain. Aunt Beatrice stared at Clara with something colder than anger. "You foolish girl," she whispered. "You have no idea who you have just challenged." Clara closed her burned hand around the surviving contract. "No," she answered, "but I believe he now knows that I exist." From somewhere beyond the house came the sharp crack of a pistol. The Duke turned toward the window. In the courtyard, the abandoned account book pages were burning in the snow. The Duke reached the courtyard before the second shot was fired. Clara followed without waiting for her cloak. Snow drove against her face as a dark figure ran between the stables and the eastern wall. A pistol flashed in his hand. The bullet struck a stone pillar inches from the Duke's shoulder. "Stay behind me," the Duke ordered. "I can identify the pages faster than you can." Clara lifted her skirts and hurried toward the fire. The scattered sheets burned in a shallow iron brazier. A stable boy lay nearby, clutching his bleeding temple. A stable groom ran toward them. "The man escaped through the eastern gate," he said. "He left his coat caught upon the wool." The groom held up a torn strip of black wool. Thomas stirred beneath the blanket. "He smelled of cloves," the boy whispered. "Strong enough that I noticed it before he struck me." Clara accepted the torn cloth. A faint, sweet scent remained upon it. The Duke examined the black thread, embroidered along its edge. "That pattern is used on coats issued to Crane's northern clerks." "Then someone employed beneath your seal burned my father's records," Clara said. The Duke's expression hardened. "Or someone wants us to believe he did." Clara folded the cloth carefully. "Then we keep it until we know which." Thomas stirred in the snow. "Miss Clara." He wore a black stag on his coat. The Duke looked toward the darkness beyond the wall. "Any servant on my northern properties might wear that emblem. And the hidden seal belonged to the man who manages those properties," Clara said. Edmund Crane. Mr. Vale had vanished from the house. Clara stood so quickly that the world tilted around her. The cold, the smoke, and the burn across her palm struck at once. The Duke steadied her by the elbow. His grip was firm but brief. He released her the moment she found her balance. "You are injured. It is only my hand. Your hand saved the contract, and the contract may save the mill." Something changed in his face, not admiration exactly, but recognition. A woman rushed from the servants' entrance carrying a blanket. Mrs. Finch had served as Whitmore's housekeeper since before Clara's birth. She wrapped Thomas carefully, then examined Clara's burned palm. "You should have left when your father died," Mrs. Finch whispered. "I begged you." "If I had left, Aunt Beatrice would have dismissed every family from the cottages. She may do worse now." Clara looked toward the house. "Then I will no longer face her without witnesses." It was the first boundary she had spoken aloud. She turned to the Duke. "If your offer of courtship was merely a way to enter this house and recover your money, withdraw it now." Aunt Beatrice gave a satisfied little breath. The Duke did not look away from Clara. "I rode here because of the theft," he said. "I announced my intention because I believed it was the only way to prevent them from forcing your signature before I arrived. So it was a performance." At first, Clara's heart gave one disobedient beat. The Duke continued, "But I will not use marriage to purchase your cooperation. You will have protection, whether you accept my courtship or refuse it." No gentleman had ever offered her a choice without first naming the price. Clara glanced down at the contract in her hand. Its burned edge had exposed a narrow strip of writing hidden beneath the final page. She carefully pulled the layers apart. A second agreement had been bound inside the first. It declared that upon marriage, all debts connected to Whitmore Mill would become Clara's responsibility alone, while control of the property would pass to Mr. Vale. The amount written beside her name was not £900. It was 9,000. Aunt Beatrice stepped backward. Clara raised the concealed agreement. You said Mr. Vale was rescuing me from poverty. He was. Then why did you prepare a document designed to send me to prison for a debt I never created? Mrs. Finch made a frightened sound. The Duke took the paper, read 3 lines, and looked toward Aunt Beatrice. Her expression changed from outrage to calculation. You are all making a grave mistake, she said. That debt is real. Clara felt the cold settle deep inside her. Whose debt is it? Aunt Beatrice looked at her with quiet triumph. Your father's, and tomorrow morning a magistrate will arrive to prove that you helped him steal every penny. The house grew quiet shortly after midnight. Clara sat alone beside the library fire, trying to replace the bandage around her burned palm. Wind pressed loose snow against the windows, and the dying logs filled the room with the warm scent of cedar. You are making that worse. She looked up. The Duke of Blackmere stood in the doorway without his coat. His white shirt was open slightly at the throat, and one dark lock of hair had fallen across his forehead. Without the mud, weapons, and authority surrounding him, he appeared younger and far more tired. I have managed my own injuries for many years, Clara said. That explains your skill with numbers, but not with bandages. He crossed the room and placed a small wooden box on the table. Clara raised an eyebrow. Does every duke carry medical supplies while courting? Only when the lady sets fire to legal documents within 10 minutes of meeting him. I did not set fire to them. No, you merely reached into the flames. There was humor in his voice. Clara tried not to smile. He sat opposite her and waited. He did not take her hand. May I? He asked. The question surprised her more than his arrival had. Clara slowly extended her palm. His fingers were warm against her wrist. He removed the damaged cloth carefully, his expression tightening when he saw the burn. You should have allowed me to recover the contract, he said. You were too far away. That sounds uncomfortably like criticism. It was an observation. I begin to understand why your aunt finds you difficult. Clara pulled her hand back. The Duke caught the change in her face. That was poorly said. It was accurately said. No, his voice softened. Your aunt finds you difficult because you see what she needs everyone else to ignore. He applied ointment to the burn. Clara studied him in the firelight. Why did you truly ride through the night? I told you. Your calculations revealed the missing money. That explains why you came to investigate. It does not explain why you announced that you intended to court me. His hands paused around hers. At first, I needed to prevent Vale from forcing your signature. And afterward, the Duke looked toward the fire. I read the page 3 times. The calculations? The notes beside them. You corrected my estate steward without insulting him. You protected families whose names you did not expect anyone important to read. And in the margin, you wrote that an account which balances by making poor people hungrier is not an honest account. Clara remembered writing the sentence in anger. I did not expect a duke to see it. That was why I could not forget it. The room seemed smaller, warmer. He finished wrapping her hand, but did not immediately release it. Their fingers touched beneath the clean linen. Clara felt the contact before she understood that neither of them had moved away. The Duke's thumb brushed once across the inside of her wrist. Then he withdrew. Mrs. Finch entered carrying tea. The moment broke. The Duke accepted a cup and took one confident drink. His face remained perfectly controlled, but his eyes watered. Clara looked at the teapot. Mrs. Finch believes tea should be strong enough to remove paint. I had noticed. You may put it down. A duke never retreats from tea. You nearly fell from your horse, faced an armed man, and entered a house containing my aunt. Must you prove yourself against a teapot as well? A laugh escaped him. It was quiet and unexpectedly warm. Clara smiled before she could stop herself. For several seconds, neither the false debt nor the approaching magistrate existed. They were simply a tired man and a guarded woman sharing terrible tea beside a winter fire. Then the clock struck 1. The Duke set down his cup. Tomorrow, they will try to make you doubt what you know. They have been doing that all my life. And has it worked? Clara looked at their hands resting only inches apart. Not tonight, she said. The magistrate arrived before breakfast. He brought 2 constables, a clerk, and a warrant bearing Clara's name. Aunt Beatrice received them in the morning room as though they were invited guests. Mr. Vale stood beside her, freshly shaved and perfectly composed. There was no snow on his boots, although he claimed he had spent the night searching for the armed intruder. Clara noticed the lie immediately. "You are accused of assisting your late father in concealing funds belonging to the Blackmere estate," the magistrate said. £9,000, accumulated over 6 years. My father never possessed £9,000. These records suggest otherwise. The clerk placed a bundle of receipts on the table. Each bore Clara's handwriting. The Duke reached for them, but the magistrate pulled them away. "You are named as the injured party, Your Grace. You may observe, but you must not interfere. I have not made a complaint against Miss Whitmore. Mr. Crane did so under the authority you granted him." The Duke became still. 6 months earlier, after an illness had left his mother unable to oversee the northern estates, he had signed a broad authorization allowing Edmund Crane to pursue unpaid debts without seeking approval for each case. That authorization now gave Crane the power to accuse Clara in Blackmere's name. "I will revoke it," the Duke said. "You may," the magistrate replied, "but revocation will not erase actions already undertaken." For the first time since arriving, the Duke looked uncertain. Clara understood why. He had ridden through the night believing his title could stop whatever waited at Whitmore House. Now his own signature stood between them. "May I examine the receipts?" she asked. The magistrate hesitated, then passed them across the table. The handwriting was an excellent imitation. The numbers leaned slightly forward. The capital letters were narrow. Even the unusual sevens carried a line through their stems. Mr. Vale smiled. "You cannot deny your own hand." "I do deny it." Clara arranged the receipts by date. Her aunt watched her fingers rather than her face. That was when Clara knew the documents contained a mistake. She examined the earliest page, then the latest. All 6 had been tied with thin brown cord. A faint scent of cloves rose from the knot. The same scent Thomas had noticed on the man in the courtyard. Clara did not mention it. Instead, she pointed to the first receipt. "This claims, I recorded a grain delivery on June 14th. "Is that significant?" the magistrate asked. "The river flooded on June 12th. The eastern bridge was unusable for 9 days. No grain cart could have reached the mill on the 14th. Mr. Vale's smile weakened. "There is another road, not for a loaded wagon. How convenient that you remember every storm." "I remember because 40 families needed bread." Clara crossed to a cabinet and removed the mill's daily production book. Aunt Beatrice moved to stop her, but Mrs. Finch stepped between them. The housekeeper's hands trembled. Her voice did not. "Miss Clara has managed those records since her father took ill. They belong to the mill." Clara opened the book to June. There had been no grain delivery on the 14th. Instead, the entry described how she had rationed the remaining flour until the bridge reopened. The magistrate compared the pages. "One false date does not disprove the full debt." "No," Clara agreed, "but it gives us a place to begin. It was a small victory, yet it changed the room." The constables stopped, regarding her as a prisoner. The clerk began inspecting the other dates. Even the magistrate lowered the warrant. The Duke met Clara's eyes. "You remembered the bridge. I remembered the people waiting on the other side of it." Mr. Vale stepped forward. "This proves nothing except that Miss Whitmore had access to the real records. She could have altered them after preparing the receipts." "That is possible," the magistrate said. The Duke's jaw tightened, but he did not challenge the conclusion. Clara felt a flash of disappointment. He had seen the contradiction, yet part of him still trusted the authority carried by official seals, signed warrants, and respectable men. He wanted proof strong enough to free him from choosing whom to believe. Aunt Beatrice noticed his hesitation too. "Your Grace," she said softly, "my niece is clever, clever enough to make innocence appear wherever she needs it." Clara closed the production book. "Then allow me to inspect the mill." Mr. Vale laughed. "The mill is under my supervision until our marriage." "There will be no marriage." Aunt Beatrice rose. "You remain my legal dependent, and you attempted to make me sign a concealed debt. You have no evidence that I knew what was inside the contract." Clara placed the burned document beside the forged receipts. "No, not yet." The words landed harder than an accusation. Aunt Beatrice's eyes narrowed. The magistrate permitted Clara to remain at Whitmore House until noon, when he would decide whether the warrant should be enforced. She was forbidden to remove or destroy any financial records. Mr. Vale was given temporary control of the mill. That was the opening he had been waiting for. Within minutes, he ordered 2 constables to accompany him there to secure the evidence. Aunt Beatrice sent the household carriage after him, claiming the roads were too dangerous to travel alone. Clara watched from the window as the carriage disappeared through the gates. A small brass key hung from Vale's watch chain. Her father's key to the locked records room. He should not have that, she said. Mrs. Finch looked away. Your aunt took it from your father's desk after the funeral. The Duke moved beside Clara. What is stored in that room? Original tenant agreements, grain contracts, payment stubs. Enough to prove the receipts were forged, or enough to destroy every record that contradicts them. A church bell sounded in the distance. One slow strike, then another. Clara looked at the clock. It was not yet 9. That is the mill alarm. Smoke appeared beyond the bare trees. The Duke called for horses, but Clara was already running toward the door. As she passed the table, she slipped the clove-scented cord from the forged receipts into her pocket. Behind her, Aunt Beatrice watched the movement. For the first time, her aunt did not look triumphant. She looked afraid. Flames were already climbing through the records room windows when Clara reached the mill. Workers formed a line from the frozen river, passing buckets toward the building. The water turned to ice beneath their boots, and smoke rolled across the yard so thickly that several men could no longer see the door. Mr. Vale stood beside the magistrate, shouting orders. No one could follow. "Break every window," he demanded. "Let the smoke escape." "No," Clara cried. "The draught will carry the fire into the flower room." Vale turned on her. "You are forbidden to interfere. If the flower dust ignites, there will be no mill left to investigate." A deep cracking sound came from inside. The workers stepped back. Clara looked at the turning wheel. It was still moving, although no grain had been delivered to the upper stones. Someone had left the machinery engaged. "Stop the wheel," she shouted. "The brake lever is inside," the mill foreman replied. "We cannot reach it." Clara ran toward the narrow spillway beside the river. The Duke caught her arm. "Where are you going?" "To close the water gate. The walkway is covered in ice, and the wheel is feeding air through the mill." He looked from her to the rushing channel. "Tell me what to do." Clara pointed toward a heavy iron chain beneath the bridge. "Pull that when I raise my hand, not before." She stepped onto the walkway. The river roared below her. Ice cracked beneath each careful step, and smoke stung her eyes. Halfway across, a board split under her foot. The Duke seized the back of her coat before she fell through. For one suspended second, Clara hung above the water. Then he pulled her against the railing. "You nearly died. If we do nothing, 20 families lose their livelihood." She freed herself and continued. At the end of the walkway, Clara kicked ice from the gate mechanism and forced the rusted handle downward. It refused to move. The flames reached the mill's second floor. "Clara," the Duke called. She wrapped both hands around the handle. Pain tore through her burned palm, but she pushed until the mechanism groaned. The gate began to descend. Clara raised one hand. The Duke and 3 workers pulled the chain. The water wheel slowed. Inside the mill, the machinery gave one final shudder and stopped. Without the moving shafts driving air through the building, the flames weakened. The workers smothered the lower fire, while the remaining buckets saved the flower room. Minutes later, smoke replaced flame. The mill still stood. A cheer rose from the yard. Clara leaned against the gate, breathless. Blood had soaked through the bandage around her palm. The Duke crossed the walkway and removed his neckcloth. Without ceremony, he wrapped the clean linen around her hand. "You knew exactly how to stop it. I grew up here. That is not the same as understanding every piece of machinery. My father believed ownership without knowledge was only another form of vanity." The Duke's hands paused. Clara wondered if her words had offended him. "Instead," he said, "your father was correct." Before she could answer, Mr. Vale emerged from the mill carrying a scorched metal box. "The records are safe," he announced. The magistrate approached him with visible relief. Vale placed the box on a stone ledge and unlocked it with the brass key from his watch chain. Inside lay stacks of tenant agreements and payment stubs. Aunt Beatrice's carriage arrived at that moment. She descended before the driver could assist her, took in the standing mill, and immediately changed her expression from alarm to pride. "Mr. Vale saved it," she called to the gathered workers. "He risked his life to recover the records." Silence spread through the yard. Clara stared at her. Mr. Vale did not enter until the wheel stopped. Her aunt tilted her head. And who ordered the workers to pull the chain? The Duke did, Vale replied. The lie was effortless. Several labourers glanced at Clara but said nothing. Vale controlled their wages now. Their children needed bread. The Duke stepped forward. Miss Whitmore explained how to close the gate. After I identified the danger, Vale said. Naturally, I allowed her to feel useful. Clara felt the old humiliation rise, the familiar sensation of watching a man receive praise for work she had done. But this time, she did not lower her eyes. Open the records box. Vale's smile faded. The documents must remain protected. Then open it before the magistrate. The magistrate nodded. Do as she asks. Vale lifted the lid again. Clara examined the contents without touching them. The papers were dry. Not merely protected from flame untouched by smoke. The records room was burning before we arrived, she said. Yet, this box carries no soot. It was stored beneath a desk. The floor was already aflame. Vale's voice hardened. What are you suggesting? That the box was removed before the fire began? A murmur passed through the workers. Clara pointed to a pale rectangle on the mill foreman's cart. Soot covered the surrounding wood, but one clean shape remained. The box sat there while the records room burned. The fire was set after the documents had been taken outside. The magistrate turned to Vale. Who removed them? I did, moments before raising the alarm. Then why did you tell us you had just recovered them from inside? Vale glanced toward Aunt Beatrice. It was brief, but Clara saw it. So did the Duke. A young mill worker stepped out of the crowd. His name was Samuel, the son of one of the tenants accused of missing rent. I saw Mr. Vale leave the records room before the bell rang, he said. Vale moved toward him. Clara placed herself between them. If you dismiss Samuel or punish his family, I will record it as an attempt to threaten a witness. You have no authority here. Perhaps not, but the magistrate does. For once, the magistrate did not hesitate. The boy and his family are to remain undisturbed. It was Clara's second victory. Small, fragile, but public. Vale closed the records box with unnecessary force. The Duke looked toward the scorched window. The fire began in a locked room. Vale possessed the only key. Aunt Beatrice stepped forward. Before you accuse Mr. Vale, perhaps the magistrate should examine what was found in Clara's bedroom. Clara turned toward her. What have you placed there? Her aunt's expression hardened. How quickly guilt teaches suspicion. The magistrate looked at the Duke. The warrant permits a search of Miss Whitmore's room. Clara spoke before he could answer. My aunt has entered that room whenever she pleased. Anything found there must be examined with that fact recorded. The Duke looked toward the magistrate. Conduct the search. Clara heard the choice clearly. He had not declared her guilty, but he had once again chosen official evidence over her warning. The constables escorted them back to Whitmore House. Clara waited in the corridor as her dresses were shaken out, her drawers opened, and her father's letters scattered across the floor. At last, a constable reached beneath the bed. He emerged holding a leather purse. Inside were 20 gold sovereigns, marked with the Blackmere stag. I have never seen that purse, Clara said. Mr. Vale lifted one coin toward the window. Blackmere treasury marks, money taken from the Duke's estate. Aunt Beatrice sank into a chair as though overcome by grief. Oh, Clara, what did your father persuade you to do? My father taught me never to hide money in a place the housemaids clean every morning. Mrs. Finch stepped forward. She speaks the truth. Nothing remained beneath that bed when I swept the room yesterday. The magistrate examined the purse. Who entered the room afterward? Mrs. Finch looked directly at Aunt Beatrice. Her ladyship dismissed me from this corridor shortly before midnight. Aunt Beatrice's face tightened. That proves nothing. No, Clara said, but it establishes who had the opportunity. The Duke stared at the sovereigns. Clara could see him searching for certainty where none yet existed. You wanted proof, she told him. Now, decide whether you will investigate how that purse reached my room or accept the first answer that protects your estate. He did not accuse her, but he did not order Aunt Beatrice questioned either. Instead, he turned to the magistrate. Miss Whitmore will remain at this house, under my personal guarantee, until the hearing. Clara's disappointment was quiet but complete. She had not been freed. She had merely been transferred from the magistrate's authority to his. The magistrate considered the Duke's proposal. Your guarantee makes you responsible for her appearance and for any missing evidence. I understand, the Duke said. The constable stepped toward her. No, the Duke said. Clara looked at him. For one moment, hope returned. Then he continued. She will remain at Whitmore House under my personal guarantee until the county hearing. I will answer for her appearance. The magistrate considered the proposal. That requires you to accept responsibility for any missing funds or destroyed evidence. I accept. Clara's hope died as quickly as it had risen. She was not free. She had merely been transferred from the magistrate's authority to the Duke's. Aunt Beatrice understood the distinction. Your Grace cannot watch her every hour, she said. Someone must oversee the mill and protect the estate records. A new voice answered from the doorway. I have already prepared the necessary order. Edmund Crane entered, carrying a black leather case. He was a narrow man in his late 40s, with silver at his temples and gloves the colour of dried wine. The private mark, hidden beneath Clara's marriage contract, was engraved on the clasp of his case. Clara caught the faint scent of cloves. So did Mrs. Finch. The housekeeper's hand found Clara's sleeve. Crane bowed to the Duke. I came as soon as I learned of the theft. Your Grace, this matter may damage not only Blackmere but every landowner whose accounts pass through Whitmore Mill. You accused Miss Whitmore without consulting me. You gave me authority to recover estate debts. I did not give you authority to forge them. Crane's expression remained calm. Then let us determine who did. He opened his case and produced an order transferring temporary control of Whitmore Mill, its grain stores, and its financial records to the Blackmere estate until the hearing. The Duke read it. Clara saw the trap immediately. If you sign that, Crane will control both sides of the accounts. Crane gave her a patient smile. That is an accusation from a woman found with stolen money beneath her bed. Money placed there by someone who knew the room would be searched. Every thief says the evidence was planted. Clara turned to the Duke. Revoke Crane's authority. Seal the records where they are. Let the magistrate appoint someone independent. The magistrate nodded slowly. That would be the safest course. Crane's composure cracked for the first time. An independent examination may take months. During that time, grain cannot be sold, rents cannot be collected, and workers cannot be paid. We have enough stored flour for 3 weeks, Clara said. Crane looked at her sharply. She had revealed that she knew the exact reserve. He changed his approach. Your Grace, your mother's winter relief program depends upon the grain contracted through this mill. If you delay, villages on Blackmere land will go without bread. The Duke looked toward the snow beyond the windows. Clara saw the conflict in his face. His mother had nearly died during a winter shortage when he was a boy. He feared hunger more than scandal, and Crane knew it. Give me until tomorrow, Clara said. One day, to compare the tenant agreements with the mill's delivery marks. Crane placed a pen beside the order. Every hour increases the risk that evidence disappears. It has disappeared only when your people controlled it. The Duke's jaw tightened. Clara took one step closer. This is the moment, Your Grace. If you sign, you will give the man, I suspect, complete authority over the proof. And if I refuse, he said, hundreds may lose their winter grain. That is the choice he designed for you. The Duke looked at Crane, then at the evidence taken from Clara's room. Finally, he picked up the pen. Your Grace, Clara whispered. He signed. Crane pressed his private seal into the wax. The same pierced black stag that had been hidden beneath the marriage contract appeared in full. Something inside Clara became very still. She no longer cared whether the Duke believed her. She would protect the tenants without him. Crane folded the order. Mr. Vale will continue managing Whitmore Mill under my supervision. Miss Whitmore is forbidden to enter the property or contact its workers. Samuel's frightened face flashed through Clara's mind. What happens to the tenant families? They will pay whatever balances the corrected accounts require. Those balances are false. Then they may prove it at the hearing. A heavy wagon rolled past the front windows. It carried sacks marked with the Whitmore millstone. Another followed. Then a third. Clara moved to the glass. Where are they taking the grain? Crane fastened his case. To Blackmere's northern storehouse. That road is blocked by snow. Not for long. Clara watched the wagons turn east, not north. They were heading toward the private river docks. The flour was not being moved to feed Blackmere villages. It was being taken out of the county. And by nightfall, every tenant Crane claimed to protect would be facing hunger. By sunset, the village bakery had no flour. The first families gathered outside Whitmore House, carrying empty baskets. Children stood beside their mothers in the snow, while Crane's men nailed corrected debt notices to every cottage door. Aunt Beatrice ordered the curtains closed. Clara opened them again. "You are forbidden to contact the tenants," Crane reminded her from the hallway. "They came to my door. They came to demand grain you helped steal." Clara turned from the window. "Your wagons took that grain east. The northern road was unsafe. The river docks are not north." Crane's expression did not change. The flour was redirected to protect it. "Then, show the Duke where it is stored." The Duke stood near the fireplace, holding a message delivered from Blackmere less than an hour earlier. 3 of his villages had also received no flour. His mother's relief kitchens would close by morning. He looked at Crane. "Where are the wagons?" "Delayed. That was not my question." Before Crane could answer, the front door shook beneath a heavy blow. A man outside shouted, "They are taking our homes!" Clara ran into the snow. Samuel stood beside his mother near the first cottage. A red notice had been nailed across their door. It claimed the family owed 4 years of unpaid rent. "That cannot be true," Clara said. Samuel's mother held up a bundle of receipts. "We paid every quarter." A constable blocked the entrance. "Mr. Crane's order authorizes seizure until the debt is settled." The Duke followed Clara across the yard. "I revoke that order." The constable lowered his eyes. "Your Grace, the property has already been transferred into temporary receivership under the document you signed. It is my authority." "It was your authority. The order now stands until the county hearing." Crane had designed the trap carefully. The Duke's title could not reverse a legal seizure with a spoken command. His signature had given the process legitimacy, and dozens of notices had already been issued beneath his name. A stone struck the wall. The villagers had begun to shout. One man pointed at the Duke. "Blackmere took our grain, and now comes for our homes." The Duke stepped forward, but Clara caught his sleeve. "Do not order soldiers into this crowd. I will not allow a riot." "Then give them a reason not to riot." He looked at her. "Tell them you signed the order," she said. "Tell them they have the right to be angry." Crane moved closer. "Your Grace, admitting responsibility would destroy confidence in Blackmere's management." "It would also be the truth," Clara replied. The Duke looked at the frightened families. Then he climbed onto the low stone wall. "The seizure order bears my signature," he said. The shouting weakened. "I believed it would protect your grain and preserve the records. I was wrong." Crane's face hardened. The Duke continued, "No family will be removed tonight, but I will personally guarantee the disputed rents until the hearing." The magistrate stepped forward. "That guarantee may prevent immediate eviction, but it does not provide food." Clara looked toward Whitmore Mill. The main storehouse had been emptied, but her father had never trusted a single winter reserve. "There is another supply." Every face turned toward her. "During the flood 6 years ago, my father built an emergency grain room beneath the old chapel, only enough for 5 days, but it can feed both estates until we recover the wagons." Crane's eyes sharpened. "Where is the key?" "There is no key. The door opens from inside the mill tunnel. You are forbidden to enter the mill. Then, the villagers remain hungry." Crane glanced toward the angry crowd and changed his answer. "Mr. Vale will retrieve it. He does not know the tunnel." "I will accompany her," the Duke said. "No," Clara replied. The refusal surprised him. "You signed away my right to enter my own mill. If you wish me to help these families, Crane must suspend that restriction in writing." "Those," Crane's mouth tightened. Clara held his gaze. "And Samuel comes with me as a witness. Mrs. Finch keeps the written order. If either condition is refused, I remain here." The villagers waited. Crane had no safe choice. He signed. The old tunnel was narrow, wet, and black with soot from the fire. Clara led with a lantern while Samuel followed behind her. The Duke came last. At the first turn, Clara raised the lantern. Fresh boot marks crossed the damp floor. "Someone entered before us," she whispered. They followed the prints into the hidden grain room. Its door stood open. Half the sacks were gone. Samuel stared at the empty rows. Who else knew this place existed? "My father, Mrs. Finch, and me." The Duke knelt beside the nearest sack. Its original mill cord had been cut away and replaced with thin brown twine. Clara removed the cord taken from the forged receipts and held it beside the knot. Both carried the same faint scent of cloves. The forged documents and the stolen grain passed through the same hands, she said. Will that prove Crane took them? Samuel asked. Not by itself, but it tells us where to look next. A sound came from the passage behind them. The outer door slammed shut. The Duke crossed the room and pushed against it. Locked from the other side, Clara lifted the lantern toward the rear wall. My father built a second passage after the flood. It opens beneath the old chapel. They could not carry every sack through the narrow opening. Clara chose the grain first. For nearly an hour, they dragged each remaining sack along the stone passage. Dust filled the air, rough cloth scraped their hands, and cold sweat gathered beneath Clara's collar. The Duke tried to take the heavier end from her. If you tell me once more that I should rest, I will leave you inside the tunnel. He almost smiled. Then I shall suffer in silence. You have not yet demonstrated that ability. Samuel laughed despite his fear. When they finally forced open the chapel hatch, villagers reached down and pulled the sacks into the moonlight. Clara emerged last. The snow felt clean against her smoke-stained face. A cheer rose when the families saw the grain. The Duke stood beside Clara, breathing hard. You saved their food. We saved what Crane failed to steal. His eyes remained on her. No, he said quietly. You saved it. I merely followed your instructions. For once, Clara did not correct him. It ended when the magistrate approached, carrying another message. The Duke read it beneath the chapel lantern. His face went pale. What is it? Clara asked. The wagons reached the river, he said. The flour was loaded onto a ship before sunset. Where is it going? Sir, France. Crane had sold the winter reserve abroad, using the authority granted by the Duke's signature. Blackmere had lost its grain, its money, and the trust of every village under its protection. The magistrate unfolded a second page. The ship sails with the morning tide, he said. Once it leaves English waters, the cargo cannot be recovered. Clara looked toward the dark river beyond the trees. Dawn was less than 6 hours away. Clara did not return to Whitmore House. She moved the rescued grain into the chapel and placed Samuel's mother in charge of distribution. Mrs. Finch brought blankets, candles, and Clara's account books before Aunt Beatrice could stop her. By midnight, the abandoned vestry had become Clara's office. The Duke returned, carrying a pot of soup from the village kitchen. I was informed that brilliant investigators occasionally require food. Who told you that? Mrs. Finch. She also said that if I allowed you to miss another meal, she would hold me personally responsible. That sounds like her. He placed 2 bowls beside the fire. For several minutes, they ate without discussing Crane, missing grain, or forged documents. Rain had begun tapping against the chapel windows. The fire filled the vestry with the scent of wood smoke and onions. Beyond the door, exhausted families slept between the pews. The Duke removed his gloves. A red mark crossed his palm, where the tunnel rope had cut him. Clara reached for his hand instinctively. You are injured. His expression changed when her fingers closed around his. It appears I am less capable of following instructions than you believed. I never believed you capable of following instructions. That is devastating. I had hoped to impress you. She cleaned the cut with the corner of a damp cloth. He watched her in silence. You do not have to stare, she said. I am trying to remember the last time someone touched me without wanting something. Her hand stopped. The humor had left his voice. What is it like? Clara asked. Being a duke? He looked into the fire, lonely in ways one is not permitted to admit. She waited. Everyone around me has spent years saying that hesitation is weakness. A duke must decide before other men finish speaking. He must never appear uncertain, frightened, or confused. And did you believe them? I became so afraid of appearing uncertain that I stopped asking whether I was right. His eyes met hers. That is why I signed Crane's order. It was easier to make a swift decision than to admit you understood the danger better than I did. Clara tied the cloth around his palm. Then, perhaps courage is not deciding quickly. What is it? Remaining in the room long enough to hear an answer you dislike. He gave a quiet, painful smile. You have provided several of those, and yet you remain. Because this room is the first place in years where I have not been required to pretend that my title makes me infallible. Clara looked down at their joined hands. You should never have been required to pretend. Would you have respected me if we had met before this? I do not know. The honesty surprised him. She continued. You would have been a duke accustomed to being obeyed. I would have been a woman your steward described as troublesome. And now? Now you are a man who drinks terrible tea without complaint. I complained internally. I knew it. They both laughed. The sound seemed almost improper within a night filled with danger. He turned his hand beneath hers until their palms met. This time, Clara did not withdraw. What would you choose, he asked, if no mill, debt, or court required your attention? The question unsettled her. No one has ever asked me that. I am asking now. Clara watched the fire. I would like one morning, when no one needs me to prove I deserve the place where I am standing. You deserve it now. That is not the same as being allowed to forget the question. He understood. For several quiet seconds, their hands remained together. Then the Duke raised her fingers toward his lips. He stopped before touching them. Clara could have pulled away. Instead, she moved her hand the final inch. His kiss was warm and careful. Nothing was promised. Nothing was taken. When he released her, the room felt different. The Duke unfolded the river map. Now, he said, his voice slightly unsteady, shall we prevent a ship from stealing your grain? Clara allowed herself one small smile. Our grain, she corrected. The tenant's grain. Of course. But you may help. It belonged to the parish, not to Whitmore or Blackmere. Crane could not order her removed without involving the vicar and explaining why he wished to prevent bread from reaching hungry families. The Duke arrived carrying a map of the river. The ship is called the Providence, he said. It will pass the Eastern Lock shortly before dawn. Who owns it? A trading company registered in Bristol. Who signed the flour contract? Crane, acting in my name. Clara spread the map across a wooden table. Then, stopping the ship will not be enough. Crane will claim the sale was lawful. I can send men to seize the cargo, and tomorrow he will accuse you of stealing property your own representative sold. The Duke looked toward the families sleeping between the chapel pews. What do you need? The original shipping order. Crane will have destroyed it. No. A dishonest man destroys evidence. A greedy man keeps whatever guarantees payment. Clara placed the clove-scented cord beside the rescued grain sack. The forged receipts and these sacks were tied with the same twine. Crane's people prepared both. That proves a connection, not a crime. Exactly. We need someone who saw the flour loaded and heard where it was going. Samuel stepped from the shadows. My brother works at the Eastern Lock. Clara knelt, so they were at eye level. Can he be trusted? He hates Mr. Vale. That is not the same thing. Samuel considered the question. He keeps count of every boat because the lockmaster cannot read. That was enough. They reached the Eastern Lock in a tenant's hay cart rather than a Blackmere carriage. Clara refused to let the Duke's crest announce their arrival. Samuel's brother, Daniel, was waiting beneath the bridge. He held a wooden tally stick marked with fresh cuts. 12 wagons entered the dock, he said. Only 9 were written in the lockmaster's book. Did you see who supervised them? Clara asked. Mr. Vale. Another gentleman stayed inside the office. Crane? Daniel nodded. What did you hear? They argued. Mr. Vale wanted his money before the ship sailed. Mr. Crane said he would be paid after Miss Whitmore signed the marriage contract. The Duke's expression darkened. Clara remained focused. Why did my signature matter? Mr. Crane said the debt had to belong to you before Blackmere inspectors arrived. The marriage was never intended to give Vale only the mill. It would have placed the entire false debt upon Clara, making her the legal explanation for years of stolen money. Once she was convicted or imprisoned, Crane could blame every missing account on a dead mill owner and his disgraced daughter. Did they leave anything? Clara asked. Daniel removed a narrow paper from inside his coat. One shipping order. Mr. Vale tore it in half and threw it beside the stove. I found this piece. The surviving section carried Crane's signature, the Providence's name, and a description of the cargo. Beneath it was a payment code Clara recognized from the forged receipts. The same £1 collection fee appeared beside every load. Clara wrapped the fragment inside a clean sheet of paper. Daniel, you must give this directly to the magistrate. Do not hand it to me or the Duke. Why? Because Crane will say we altered it. Daniel placed the paper inside his shirt. The Duke studied Clara. You think of every way the truth can be attacked. I have spent years living with people who attacked it. He looked away. They found the lockmaster in a small office near the water. The old man confirmed that Crane had ordered him to leave 3 wagons unrecorded. He had obeyed because the order carried the Duke's seal. The Duke's shoulders lowered. "How many times has my name been used this way?" The lockmaster stared at the floor. "For years, Your Grace." Clara watched the answer land. Crane had not built the scheme in a single winter. He had expanded it each time the Duke trusted his seal more than the people living beneath it. Outside, the Providence's lamps appeared along the river. The ship was approaching the lock. The Duke reached for the pistol beneath his coat. Clara stopped him. "No violence. He is taking the grain. And we are taking his protection." She explained the plan. The lockmaster would delay the ship by claiming ice had damaged the gate. Daniel would ride to the magistrate with the shipping order. Clara would compare the ship's cargo marks with the mill accounts, while the Duke publicly revoked Crane's authority before witnesses. "If I revoke it now, the sale may still stand," he said. "But every action Crane takes afterward becomes his alone." The Duke removed a small silver seal from his pocket. "My authority created this danger." "Yes. I should have believed you. You should have investigated before deciding whether belief was convenient." He accepted the correction without defending himself. "When this is over," he said, "I will restore the mill to you. It was never yours to restore." His face tightened with shame. Clara continued, "You will correct the false debts, repay every family harmed under your seal, and surrender all claims against Whitmore Mill. Those are my conditions for cooperation. And your condition for allowing me to court you. There is no courtship while I remain dependent upon your protection." The answer hurt him. He bowed his head once. "Then I will help make certain you no longer need it." For the first time, Clara believed he understood the difference between rescuing a woman and respecting her. A horse thundered across the bridge. Daniel had begun his ride to the magistrate. He did not reach the far road. Two men emerged from behind the toll house and pulled him from the saddle. Clara ran toward him, but Mr. Vale stepped into the lantern light with a pistol aimed at Daniel's chest. Crane followed, holding the torn shipping order he had taken from the boy. "You continue to mistake intelligence for power, Miss Whitmore," Crane said. Behind him, the Providence entered the lock. The gate closed, and Crane dropped their only written proof into the black water. The shipping order disappeared beneath the ice. Clara stopped at the edge of the lock. Mr. Vale kept his pistol against Daniel's chest, while Crane's men forced the lockmaster away from the gate controls. Behind them, the Providence waited in the dark water, its hold filled with enough flour to feed 2 estates through winter. Crane raised a document bearing the Duke's seal. "The cargo was sold legally. Any attempt to stop this vessel will be treated as theft." The Duke stepped beside Clara. "My authorization is revoked. Not according to this." Crane handed the document to the lockmaster's clerk. It declared that Blackmere had extended Crane's authority for another year. The signature looked genuine. Even the Duke's silver seal appeared beneath it. "I never signed that," the Duke said. Crane smiled. "A convenient memory." Men from nearby cottages had gathered along the bridge. They heard only a Duke denying his own signature after discovering that his grain was gone. Whispers spread through the crowd. Clara saw the danger immediately. Crane was no longer trying merely to escape. He was making the Duke appear incompetent enough that no denial could be trusted. Mr. Vale pushed Daniel to his knees. "Order the lock opened," he said, "or the boy dies before the ship moves another foot." Samuel cried out from the hay cart. Clara turned to the lockmaster. "Open it." The Duke stared at her. "If that ship leaves, Daniel will not be sacrificed for grain." The gate began to rise. Water rushed through the opening. The Providence moved slowly forward. Crane's victory was complete. He had the flour, the forged authority, and the only surviving shipping order. By sunrise, he would be beyond the county's reach. Then Aunt Beatrice's carriage arrived. She descended with the magistrate beside her. "Clara Whitmore," the magistrate called. "You are under arrest for attempting to interfere with lawful Blackmere property." Aunt Beatrice held up a letter. It claimed Clara had planned to seize the grain, sell it herself, and flee with the Duke's assistance. The letter bore Clara's handwriting. Again, "This was found in the chapel," Aunt Beatrice said, "beside the stolen mill records." Mrs. Finch stepped from the carriage with a bruise across her cheek. "I tried to stop her," she said. Clara's hands curled. "What did she do to you?" Her aunt answered instead. "Mrs. Finch was dismissed for helping you conceal evidence. You cannot dismiss her from a house that is not yours." Whitmore House becomes mine if you are convicted. There it was. Aunt Beatrice had never needed Clara to marry Vale forever. She needed Clara to accept the false debt long enough to lose both the mill and the house. The magistrate approached with the warrant. The Duke drew his pistol. Every constable raised his weapon. Crane's smile returned. Careful, Your Grace. Threatening a magistrate will not improve your reputation. Ah, Clara placed her hand over the Duke's pistol and lowered it. No more protection that requires me to become your excuse. His eyes met hers. Then he stepped into the center of the bridge and raised both empty hands. Magistrate, before you arrest Miss Whitmore, you will hear my statement. This is neither the time nor place. It is precisely both. The Duke faced the villagers, the dock workers, and the constables. I signed the order that gave Edmund Crane control of Whitmore Mill. Crane's expression tightened. I signed it after Miss Whitmore warned me that doing so would place every record beneath the authority of the man she suspected. I ignored her because I feared delay more than I feared injustice. The magistrate stopped. The Duke continued, each word costing him something visible. For 6 years, I allowed others to use my seal without examining whom they harmed. If these debts are false, they survived because I valued convenient obedience above truth. Any court that investigates Miss Whitmore must investigate me as well. A murmur rolled across the bridge. By his own admission, the Duke had exposed himself to financial inquiry, political humiliation, and claims from every tenant harmed under Crane's authority. He had told the costly truth, but he had not saved Clara. The magistrate held out his hand. She surrendered herself without resistance. As the constable fastened the restraint around her wrist, the Providence cleared the lock. Crane stood on its deck. He believed he had won. Then Clara noticed what hung from the mast. A lantern burned above the ship's cargo mark. Beneath it, every flour sack carried the black stag emblem, but the stag faced left. Whitmore sacks had always been marked with a millstone. Blackmere relief sacks bore a stag facing right. Clara remembered the hidden seal beneath the marriage contract, a black stag pierced by a line. Crane had copied the Duke's emblem repeatedly, but he had reversed it when carving his private version. A man copying a seal from its impression often forgot that the carving must face the opposite direction. The sacks on the Providence had not come from Blackmere's official stores. They had been remarked using Crane's private stamp. The same error would appear on every forged document prepared by his office, including the extended authorization he had just shown the clerk. Clara turned to the magistrate. Before you take me away, ask Crane one question. What question? Ask him which direction the stag faces on the seal he claims belongs to the Duke. The magistrate looked toward the departing ship. He will simply give the correct answer, not if he must prove it. Understanding came slowly. Clara looked at the forged authorization still held by the clerk. Tomorrow, at the county hearing, make Crane bring the metal seal he says created that impression. Do not tell him why. Kill. And if he refuses? Then his document cannot be authenticated. The Duke stepped closer. What are you planning? Clara watched the Providence vanish into the darkness. I am going to make Crane swear that one seal created every order. Her eyes settled upon the reverse stag stamped into the wax. Then I will force the seal itself to prove that he lied. By noon the next day, every bench in the county hall was occupied. Tenants from Whitmore and Blackmere crowded the rear gallery. Mill workers stood beside dockhands, while local landowners filled the front rows, eager to discover whether the Duke of Blackmere had permitted the largest grain theft in the county's history. Clara entered under guard. Aunt Beatrice sat beside Mr. Vale near the magistrate's table. Crane stood behind them with his black leather case and the confidence of a man who believed the decisive evidence had sunk beneath the river. The Duke waited alone on the opposite side. He did not approach Clara. He had honoured her condition. Samuel and Daniel were hidden in the vicar's residence until called Missus. Finch had placed the clove-scented cord, the surviving marriage contract, and the reversed authorization inside 3 separate envelopes. Each had been signed across its seal by the magistrate and 2 witnesses. No one person could now alter the evidence without leaving a mark. The magistrate called the hearing to order. Crane attacked first. He presented the forged receipts bearing Clara's handwriting, the duplicate key found in her room, and the sovereigns marked with the Blackmere stag. He described her as an ambitious woman who had manipulated her dying father's accounts and then persuaded a lonely duke to protect her. Aunt Beatrice lowered her head as if ashamed. My niece always believed she was cleverer than the men around her, she said. Her father encouraged it until she could no longer accept the natural limits of her position. Several gentlemen nodded. Clara felt the old insult searching for a place to wound her. It found none. Mr. Vale produced the marriage contract. I offered to make her my wife despite the accusations. She refused because marriage would place her accounts under my examination. You concealed a second agreement inside it, Clara said. I did not prepare the document. Who did? Your aunt's solicitor. Aunt Beatrice looked startled. Vale had shifted blame without warning her. Clara noticed. So did Mrs. Finch. Crane then placed the extended authorization before the magistrate. This confirms that I acted lawfully under the Duke's authority. The flower sale prevented financial collapse after Miss Whitmore's theft was discovered. The magistrate examined the wax. And you brought the seal that created this impression? Crane opened his leather case and removed a metal stamp. I did. The object displayed a black stag pierced by a narrow line. Clara did not yet ask him to use it. Instead, she began with the dates. The first receipt says grain arrived at Whitmore Mill on June 14th. Yes, Crane replied. The Eastern Bridge was destroyed on June 12th. A cart may have used another road. The county repair record states every route into Whitmore was closed to heavy wagons for 9 days. The magistrate examined the repair record. Crane's mouth tightened. Clara presented 3 more receipts. These claim my father signed collection orders after his right hand became paralyzed. Mrs. Finch, which hand did he use afterward? His left. And who copied his accounts? You did. So anyone wishing to forge his later records needed access to my handwriting. Clara turned toward Aunt Beatrice. Who controlled my room, my letters, and my father's desk after his death? Her aunt sat rigidly. As your guardian, I did. The first piece settled into place. Samuel was brought forward. He testified that Vale had left the mill records room before the alarm sounded. Daniel followed, describing the argument at the dock and Crane's statement that payment depended upon Clara signing the marriage contract. Crane laughed. 2 boys, repeating a story taught to them by Miss Whitmore. They were kept apart from her after the arrest, the magistrate said. Crane's laughter stopped. Clara then held up the brown cord. Daniel, was the stolen shipping order tied to anything? No. Crane relaxed. Clara continued. Samuel, what did the man who burned the ledger pages smell of? Cloves. Mrs. Finch opened the second envelope and removed the cord from the forged receipts. The scent remained faint, but unmistakable. Clara did not claim the cord proved everything. She used it only to connect the attacks. The poisoned bridle, the forged receipts, and the retied grain sacks had all passed through hands, using the same clove-treated packing twine. The magistrate looked at Crane's leather case. A coil of identical brown cord rested inside. Crane snapped the case shut. Common packing material. Then it cannot harm you, Clara said. The Duke was called next. He stood before the entire county and identified every genuine document he had signed. The first authorization, allowing Crane to pursue debts, was real. The mill transfer order was also real. The extension granting Crane another year of authority was not. You expect this hall to trust a man who admitted he signed orders without reading them? Crane demanded. No, the Duke replied. I expect them to trust evidence. My negligence is not proof of your innocence. He removed his silver ducal seal and placed it on the table. My seal has remained with me since I arrived at Whitmore House. The extension appeared afterward. Crane pointed toward Clara. Then she copied it before the Duke came. Clara approached the evidence table. Your entire accusation depends upon one claim, that the same ducal authority connects my father's debt, the mill seizure, and the flower sale. It does. And the extended authorization? Yes. The marriage contract. Crane hesitated. Aunt Beatrice's face changed. Clara repeated the question. Was the hidden seal beneath my marriage contract created under your authority? Crane looked toward Vale, then toward the crowded gallery. If he denied it, Vale could claim the entire scheme belonged to Crane. If he admitted it, he tied himself directly to the attempt to force Clara's signature. Pride made the decision for him. Yes, Crane said. I prepared the contract to protect Blackmere's financial interest. And the shipping order you destroyed at the lock. I destroyed nothing. Daniel stepped forward. You took it from me and dropped it into the water. Crane shrugged. A frightened boy's invention. Clara placed the Duke's genuine silver seal beside Crane's metal stamp. Then swear before the magistrate that your stamp faithfully reproduces the Duke of Blackmere's emblem. Crane looked at the two seals, but did not touch them. I swear it, and swear that the impressions upon the debt receipts, the hidden marriage agreement, and the extended authorization all prove they were issued beneath Blackmere authority. I swear it. Clara finally asked the clerk to bring a candle, fresh wax, and 2 blank sheets of paper. The hall fell silent. The Duke pressed his genuine seal into the first pool of wax. Crane pressed his stamp into the second. At first glance, the impressions appeared identical. 2 black stags, 2 noble emblems, 2 claims to authority. Then Clara turned both pages toward the window and placed them side by side beneath the daylight. One stag faced right, the other faced left. Clara pointed toward the flour sack recovered from the chapel. Its false emblem turned in the same direction as Crane's stamp. The reversed stag appears on the stolen grain, the hidden contract, and the forged extension. Crane stood abruptly. A carving error proves nothing. Clara met his eyes. No, the direction alone does not prove who created the false debts. She lifted the original authorization the Duke had admitted signing 6 years earlier. But the mistake you made when copying this seal reveals exactly when the theft began. The magistrate leaned forward. Clara placed the old authorization beside the first forged receipt. The final contradiction was now visible to the entire hall. The first forged receipt carried a date from 6 years earlier. The Duke's original authorization had been signed 5 years ago. A murmur swept through the hall. Clara allowed the contradiction to settle before she spoke. Crane claims he collected this debt under authority granted by the Duke, but the first false payment was recorded 11 months before that authority existed. The magistrate looked from the receipt to the authorization. Crane's face turned grey. Clara continued. He could not have acted for Blackmere when the theft began. He used Whitmore Mill to collect false payments first. Later, when the Duke gave him control of the northern accounts, Crane created a second set of false debts and made each estate appear to owe the other. The system was simple enough for every tenant in the gallery to understand. Crane took £1 from Whitmore. He took another from Blackmere. Then he blamed the missing money on a debt passing between them. Clara's father had discovered the pattern. Before he could expose it, his health failed. Crane used Aunt Beatrice's access to remove the original pages and copy Clara's handwriting. The debt receipts were tied with cord from Crane's office, Clara said. The stolen flour sacks were tied with the same cord, and every false order carried his reversed stag. Crane pointed toward Aunt Beatrice. She supplied the handwriting samples. Aunt Beatrice rose so violently that her chair fell backward. You promised no one would discover them. The words escaped before she understood what she had admitted. Silence struck the hall. Mr. Vale moved toward the side door. 2 constables blocked him. Aunt Beatrice turned on Crane. You said Clara would sign, marry Vale, and take the blame. You said the Duke would never examine a woman's accounts. Crane's careful composure vanished. And you said your niece was weak enough to frighten. Clara watched the conspiracy destroy itself. Not through a miraculous confession, but through pressure, proof, and the certainty that each conspirator would sacrifice the others. The magistrate ordered the doors locked. Mrs. Finch opened the final envelope and presented the surviving marriage contract. Beneath the burned edge remained the hidden agreement, transferring control of Whitmore Mill to Vale while placing the £9,000 debt upon Clara. Vale's name appeared beside Crane's reversed seal. You needed my signature before the Blackmere inspection, Clara said. Once I became Vale's wife, he would control the mill. I would carry the debt. If the fraud was exposed, you would present me as the woman who forged both estates' accounts. Vale's voice shook. I never intended to send you to prison. No, you intended to frighten me until I surrendered everything voluntarily. Clara turned to Aunt Beatrice. And you helped him because Whitmore House would pass to you after my conviction. Her aunt lifted her chin. No gentleman would have chosen you without your property. The insult returned to the room where it had first begun, but it no longer possessed any power. Clara looked at the villagers filling the gallery. Then it is fortunate I learned to choose myself. The magistrate ordered Crane arrested for fraud, forgery, destruction of evidence, and unlawful sale of entrusted grain. Vale was detained for conspiracy, attempted coercion, and his role in the mill fire. Aunt Beatrice was placed under investigation for planting evidence and assisting the forged marriage agreement. The Providence was stopped at the next lock after the magistrate sent riders carrying the court order. Its cargo was returned before another night passed. But the Duke's reckoning was not erased by Crane's guilt. He stood before the tenants once more. "My signature made these seizures possible," he said. "Crane deceived me, but I gave him authority because it was easier than knowing what happened beneath my name." He surrendered his claim against Whitmore Mill. He ordered every false rent repaid with interest from his private income. Families already removed from Blackmere cottages were offered restoration or compensation. An independent committee, including tenant representatives, would examine every account carrying his seal. Then he turned toward Clara. "The protection I offered you became another form of control. I asked you to trust me while refusing to trust your judgment. The admission was public. So was the repair. But he did not ask for forgiveness." 3 months later, Whitmore Mill turned again. Clara stood beside the restored water gate while workers unloaded the first spring grain. The mill belonged to a trust established by her father, with Clara named as its independent manager. Neither a husband nor a guardian could sell it without her written consent and the approval of the tenant board. Mrs. Finch lived in Whitmore House by Clara's invitation. Samuel worked beside the mill clerk and was learning to keep accounts. His brother had been appointed assistant lockkeeper after the magistrate praised his courage. Aunt Beatrice no longer lived at Whitmore. Her allowance was reduced to modest, separate maintenance, while the court examined how much money she had received from Crane. Vale lost every claim to the mill. Crane's properties were seized to repay the families harmed by his scheme. The Duke fulfilled every promise without visiting Clara. He sent no jewels, nor roses, no letters asking whether his regret had earned him another chance. Only monthly reports showing which debts had been corrected and which families had been repaid. On the first morning of spring, hoofbeats sounded in the courtyard. Clara looked up. The Duke of Blackmere had arrived alone. This time, his coat was clean, his horse was rested. He carried no warrant, no account book, and no announcement prepared for an audience. He stopped several steps away from her. "I once rode through the night because I believed urgency gave me the right to enter your life." Clara waited. "I have come differently today." "How?" "Without authority, without conditions, and prepared to leave, if that is your answer." He held out a folded paper. Clara opened it. It was not a proposal. It was an invitation to inspect Blackmere's newly reorganized tenant accounts, not as his dependent or future wife, but as a paid independent advisor with full authority to publish any wrongdoing she discovered. At the bottom, he had left a second space blank. "What belongs there?" she asked. "Your terms." Clara studied him. "Do you still wish to court me?" "Yes." "And if I refuse?" "The mill remains yours. The repayments continue. Nothing I repaired will be taken back." For the first time, his courtship carried no hidden debt. Clara took her father's silver account key from her pocket and placed it on the table between them. "One visit," she said, "in daylight. You may walk with me to the tenant cottages and listen while they speak." Hope entered his face, restrained by everything he had learned. "And after that, I will decide whether you have earned a second." The Duke bowed, not to a helpless woman he had come to rescue. To the woman whose judgment had saved 2 estates after his own had endangered them, Clara turned toward the mill road. The Duke waited until she chose the direction before falling into step beside her. Morning sunlight crossed the fields, turning the last patches of snow to silver. The air smelled of wet earth, new grain, and wood smoke drifting from the tenant cottages. After several quiet paces, his hand brushed hers. He immediately drew back. Clara caught his fingers before he could retreat. The Duke looked down at their joined hands. "Does this mean I have earned a second visit?" "No," she said, although a smile had already betrayed her. "It means you may finish the first." He laughed softly. It was the first completely unguarded sound she had heard from him. Then his expression grew serious. "I did not ride through the night because I believed you needed a duke. Why did you?" "Because after reading one page written in your hand, I feared I might spend the rest of my life regretting that I had never met you." Clara's fingers tightened around his. "You nearly ruined that meeting." "I am aware. You doubted me. Yes. You placed my future beneath another man's authority. Yes. And one walk will not repair it. No, he met her eyes. But if you permit me, I would like to spend as many walks as necessary proving that I understand. Clara studied him. The man who had first entered Whitmore House carried a title like a weapon. The man beside her now offered no command, promise, or bargain. Only time, only truth, only his open hand within hers. Then do not waste the daylight, she said. Relief softened his face. He lifted her burned palm, but paused before touching it. Clara gave the smallest nod. The Duke pressed one careful kiss beside the fading scar. Warmth travelled through her more powerfully than the pain ever had. When he lowered her hand, Clara did not release him. Together, they continued toward the cottages. Behind them, the great mill wheel began to turn steady, restored, and answering to Clara's hand. Aunt Beatrice had once told her that no gentleman would choose her, but Clara no longer measured her worth by any man's choice. She had chosen her work, she had chosen her freedom, and now, without surrendering either, she was free to choose who might walk beside her.